Thanks.
Yes,
So, hi
please, Hugo.
everyone. My name is Hugo. I'm here to tell you about a game that I wrote, a text adventure called Tristam Island, and then I also translated it into French just last year as L'Île Tristam. I just wanted to talk to you about it and a little bit about the tools that I used, because some of the tools you might not be aware that they're very new, and if you want to write your own text adventure for Commodore 64, there's really some great things you can do with those kind of systems. I'll just start by introducing myself because I'm a little bit new to the community. I'm mostly a writer of text adventures. I wrote like a couple dozen of them, but also other kinds of narrative games. And I have never owned a Commodore computer. It's just during the pandemic that I really started digging into all the retro computers. I installed Vice for the very first time, and I learned a lot about the Commodore computers. And I wrote the text adventure, just kind of discovering the tools, and I had a lot of help from great people as well. So yeah, really my passion, I guess, was text adventures. I discovered, so I was playing point and click adventures in the 90s, and then in the early 2000s I discovered the text adventures, and it was very good for me because I can't draw anything. So it was a good way for me to make my own games, and it's really quite the active scene in terms of writing. So different settings, different puzzles, different concepts for games. It's still quite active. And then as I started exploring this, I also realized that, so I'm French, and there hasn't been really much information or articles or anything that had been written about French text adventures. And so I called a few people, I did some interviews, I kind of tried to gather information about all the text adventures in French, which involved playing a lot of Apple II games, but also a few Commodore 64 games. And then the last couple of years, I kind of expanded, and I now have a English language newsletter on retro text adventures. It's just the more you dig, the more information you find in this, and it's really, um, uh, yeah, it's really fun. So the game that I wrote, Tristam Island, came out in November 2020, and it was released for 36 different platforms, which includes basically all the Commodores. It's also compatible with Amiga, with the Atari computers. There's also some weird platforms like the Dreamcast in there as well. And the concept of the game was really to make something that was inspired by the Infocom text adventures. I used the tools developed by Infocom, and the feel of the game. I really wanted to make it just like the Infocom text adventures because they're great. So it's a game that's set on a deserted island, and you try to survive, and you uncover more and more secrets. It's about 6 to 7 hours of gameplay. Um, and this is what it looks like. So on a stock Commodore 64, this is the game, which like that's literally the first screen that you see. And so as you see, there's no graphics. It's purely a text adventure. But I tried to use as much as possible the format and try to cram as much game as I could, which, I mean, I'll get to that a bit later. And the game was pretty well received by magazines, so I was really happy with that. I got the Sizzler Award in Zap 64 magazine. I also got some very nice write-ups in some Amiga magazines and the Apple II magazine as well. And the players also started sending me pictures of the game working on all the different platforms. So as you can see, there's here Commodore PET, there's the Commodore 128 to the left, and then ORIC on the right. And it was really quite a bit of work, but I can't take too much credit either. It was mostly trying to talk to the right people and trying to find how to make this format work on as many platforms as possible using Infocom's tool and using some other programs that had been developed by different communities, sometimes in obscure forums and things like that. Oh yeah, and then last year I translated the game into French, which was also kind of difficult because all the engine and the interpreter programs on the different platforms, they mostly didn't really support accents. So accented characters were a major challenge. And there was also problems on the space that you need. Like, kind of already had maxed my space in writing the game in English, and then I translated it into French, which is kind of a more a language that requires more letters, more words for the same information. So I kind of had to find ways to optimize everything. I won't go into the details, but it was a very big challenge to translate into French as well. But it's done, it works. So very happy with that. And so here's a little bit about the tools that I used to do this. And first of all, I just want to mention there's a lot of people that helped me. So Infocom, 1980s text adventures, and the way they did it is that they had an engine, an interpreter program that ran games on a specific format. And then Graham Nelson found a way to make more games in that format. Andrew Plotkin fixed a few bugs last year, which meant that it was possible to target 8-bit computers and things like that. Frederick Ramsberg and Johan Bernson did a lot of great work, especially in the Commodore 64 aspect, to help create those games. And Stefan Vogt was also writing a game at the same time as me, and he helped me a lot with getting it to work on a few different platforms, and we kind of bounced ideas off of each other. So yeah, a lot of people helped me, really. And yeah, I kind of alluded to that, and maybe that's something that you already know, but just in case. So when the Infocom games came out in the 1980s, the format that was used is that they had a virtual machine, meaning that they defined a set of instructions, or virtual instructions, and they wrote the game file using those virtual instructions. And then all they had to do is create a program for each platform. So one for the Commodore, one for the Amstrad, one for Oric, et cetera, et cetera. And this program would take those virtual instructions and translate them into actual instructions for the processor, right? Which means that you write this kind of interpreter program just once when you want to support a new platform. And then after that, all you have to do is write the games in the right format, and then just put the games on the floppy. There was a few different formats, and things can get a little technical, but basically all you need to know is that the basic format, the one that was used by Zork, Planetfall, Suspended, all kinds of games like that. It's a format that was that has a kind of harsh constraint in terms of space. You can only have 255 objects and 128 kilobytes of data, which includes the object definition, the connections between the room, the text that you actually display, and things like that. And then in the late 80s, they had a different format, kind of an evolution of the Z3 format, which is Z5, which made games bigger, and they had a little bit more effects. So it's things like Trinity and Border Zone and things like that. But this means that the Z5 format doesn't really run on every single platform. If I remember right, I think for the Commodores, most of the Commodore supports Z3 and Z5. But if you look at things like the TRS-80 or even the Oric, they only do Z3. So I went with Z3 when I wanted to create my game, because I wanted to make it available on as many platforms as I could. But this meant then that I was making things harder for myself, right? And then the tools that I used, so Graham Nelson wrote a programming language called Inform, and there's a lot of great documentation online. There's a designer's manual, there's quite a bit of tutorials and books that have been written on this. And once you write your game using the programming language, you have a compiler that converts it into the right format, into Z3 or Z5. Then all you have to do is grab your copy of Zork for the Commodore 64, and you take out the game file, which usually is called game.dat or something, DAT or something like that. And you just replace it with yours, and then you just put it in your Commodore 64, and it just works. There's not really anything to try to dodge a copy protection or anything like that. If you swap the game files, it just works. But it wasn't, so that was 1993 when this tool came out, and it kind of created, like, there's thousands of games that were created using Inform. But it wasn't until 2022 or maybe 2019, 2020 and 2019, that the tools were refined so that really the games could be made more playable on 8-bit microcomputers. A lot of it is the work of Frederick Ramsberg and Johan Bernson. They wrote a library for Inform that was optimized for 8-bit computers, meaning really having, like, making sure the code is very optimized, very fast, and things like that. Basically, if you wrote the game using the usual Inform library, the game would run, but it would be slow. And in the part that is taken care of by the library, which is how to recognize the word, how to parse the input, how to match it with the different verbs, different actions, and things like that. This would take a lot of space. And then you would have just, like, I can't remember, but you have, I think it used to take 70 kilobytes, and then you have 50 kilobytes to write your game, whereas Puny Inform takes 23 or 25 kilobytes, meaning you have basically 100 kilobytes for your game, which is much better. And then Frederick and Johan did also a second thing in parallel. They created Osmo, which is a great interpreter for Commodore computers. So this is available on their GitHub. And this means that you can just download this and find any game file that you want, so Z3 or Z5 or even Z8, the bigger formats, and play them on your C64 or sorry, the C64, C128, the Plus4, and also the Mega 65. So quite a few platforms taken care of by this great program. So yeah, once all these tools, and I helped with Osmo, and I helped with Puny Inform quite a bit to try to develop this, and all the while I was working on the game. And the way that I did it is kind of the process that I have for text adventures. I usually draw a map first using a great tool called Tristam. I'll put the link a little bit, I think in a couple slides. Then you have to figure out the plots and the puzzles, how they kind of chain to into each other, what kind of things is the player expected to do in which order, things like that. The aspect in the game design, I wanted to make a game that was nicer than Infocom, as in it wouldn't lock you out, it wouldn't just kill you kind of arbitrarily or make you lose your save. Just something that you can just focus on the exploration and take your time to unravel the puzzles. But what I hadn't really considered is that this idea, these graphs that you see, they actually translated to a very big game. And so there was a lot of work and a lot of sweat involved, and I had to develop my own techniques and things like that to make it fit within the constraints. And as you see at the bottom right, that's the result of compiling the game. You can only have 255 objects, and I used 254. And then there was 2 bytes free at the end. So it was 128 kilobytes minus 2. So yeah, a great experience, lots of learning, but very, very complicated as well. And this is a part of the talk where I point up the camera and say, what I did, you can also do it. And I'm going to tell you how. This is going to be like a lot of names and a lot of links. So maybe you want to take a screenshot, or maybe you'll look at the recording on YouTube later. But this is how you would go about making your own text adventure for Commodore using the tools that are compatible with Infocom floppies. The first thing is you need to start using Inform 6. So you need the compiler, which is on David Kinder's GitHub. And then you can find a tutorial. So for example, the Inform Beginner's Manual is a 200-page book, I think, but it really takes you by the hand and makes you do, I think, 3 different full games of increasing complexity. So it's a great resource to start. And then you can also download the Puny Inform library on Johan's person GitHub, which again makes sure it's basically the exact same functionalities as other libraries, but it's much faster, so it'll run better on your C64. And then the build tools here are Stefan Voigt's script to, once you have the game, it just kind of puts it all together, generates the right disk files for like I think 25 different platforms, including all the Commodores. Or if you want to do it more by hand, you could download Osmo by yourself and generate a disk image from that. And the last link is Trisboard, is the tool that I use to kind of plan the game, make a map, and get an idea of what would be in the game. So it's more on the design side than on the actually making it work on the Commodore, right? And I also wanted to mention that you can also do it on Amiga. I have a good friend of mine who actually created a whole text adventure on his Amiga, and he was able to do that because the Inform 6 compiler has been compiled for Amiga. There's a package available for it. And then you just have to download the libraries and put it all together. So you can create it on your Amiga and then play it, of course, on your Amiga using one of the many interpreters that exist for it, Frotz or JZip or Amiga Zip, and there's a few of them. And really, that's it. I just wanted to wrap up with, if you don't necessarily want to use the same tools as Infocom, or if this Inform6 language is a little too complicated, or you don't want to get into this, there's other tools that allow you to create text adventures on Commodore 64. For example, the Quill. So probably a lot of you know this already. This is a tool that came out in 1984, I think, for the Commodore 64, and really a bunch of other platforms. And the way that it works is that you work on your Commodore 64 through a series of menus that allow you to define the locations, the text, the objects, the triggers, what happens when you pick up this object, the conditions, like you have to have this object to pass this door, things like that. There's an extension or an add-on that was released in '85 that allowed you to add graphics. So the Quill, like the basic Quill software, allows you to do some text-only games, and then you can use the Illustrator to make it a graphical adventure. So it's quite a neat system. There's not really a very complex programming language to, not that Inform6 is very complex, like it's kind of an object-oriented, very nice language, but this is basically no code if you want to use the Quill, but it does make for adventures that are a bit simpler in terms of less vocabulary, less text, and things like that. The memory is a little bit more constrained. But I do think that you can, using the Quill, you can write games for the tapes, which Infocom's games are usually disk-based, but the Quill also allows you to do tape-based games, I think. And then the other tool, so that's also actually a very neat story. In the late 1980s, there was a Spanish studio called Aventuras AD, and they were basically the Spanish Infocom. They made some great text adventures, and they did that using an engine that was developed for them by the creator of the Quill. That engine was called DAD, or DAD, and it allowed them to make graphical text adventures. And then in I think it was in 2015, where everything was found and uploaded and preserved, and people started working with this and making modern tools that allow you to target this kind of, formats, right? So that's the tool that's called DAD Ready. You can find it at this address, and it's a little bit of a programming language, but not too bad. Kind of simple conditions and prints and things like that. And if you edit a text file, edit the right text file in the DAD Ready directory, and then put your images in the right directories as well, then you have a bunch of scripts that will allow you to generate your graphical adventure for the C64, but also for, I think there's Spectrum, MSX, Amstrad, Amiga, things like that. So it's quite a nice tool, and this picture is a picture of Stefan Voigt's game from 2019 called The Curse of Rabenstein. That was the first game that was written using the DAD Ready framework. So yeah, I encourage you to look at this as well. And really, that's all. I just wanted to kind of show you all those cool tools and talk a little bit about how I created my game. If you want to find it, you can find it on my either on my website hlabrande.fr, on my itch account, so hlabrande.itch.io. You can always reach out to me on Twitter at hlabrande if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. I'm looking here in the chat if I see any questions. I don't see any questions, but I think one point maybe. I mean, you explained a lot about how you created the game. That's really nice. But if you had to, I mean, to pitch the game, explain us a bit, just to give us, just to tease us with the game. How would you describe that? And can you say maybe what is the, I don't know, the time expected to one can expect to complete the game? Is it how many options, or how many paths do we need to, how many screens are there, or something like that?
Yeah, for
Just to
sure.
get
So
into the game.
the
Yeah.
the game is you just start on the beach, wash the shore after an airplane crash in the middle of the Atlantic, and you're on a deserted island with not really an obvious way to get out of it. So the first part of the game is kind of exploring the island and trying to find a way to eat and a way to sleep, kind of classic stuff in the deserted island kind of scenario. But the island has if you climb up the island, then you eventually find that there's traces of life, that the island used to be inhabited by quite a few people. And there's hints that something went wrong on the island and that everybody had to flee, to run away. There's a big white house on top of the island, which is an obvious reference to the Zork game, but also this is the place that you want to try to break into, and that's where you'll uncover the final secret of the island. It's about it's quite a long game, I guess. It's 6 to 7 hours, I think. I have a free demo that's just the first part, so exploring kind of the lower level of the island and trying to find food and trying to find a place to sleep. That's about maybe an hour and a half of gameplay. So you can just download this and see if you like it first before you buy it. The game is priced at just $3 or $4, so it won't cost you too much anyway. So yeah, 6 to 7 hours of gameplay, and I think I have something like 70 different locations to explore. And again, there's several, like there's the lower level of the island, and you manage to go up and you explore some more, and then you manage to go inside the house and you explore some more, and you find some secrets in there and things like that. And yeah, 70 locations, and the rest are just the objects that you can pick up, that you can look at, you can explore the different clues, and there's I think about 20 or 25 different puzzles to solve. And it's not, I made my best to make it not linear. It's not just like you are blocked until you can find the answer to this puzzle, and until then, well, you're just got completely stuck. I try to make it nicer, and so you can work on several different problems at the same time. Because sometimes it helps, right? You're stuck on something, and you're just like, okay, I'm going to look at this other way to do, like this other puzzle, and then you have this idea about the other one, and you just run back at the other side of the island, things like that. So yeah, and that way I try to make it really nice and playable for players to not get stuck and to not lose their progress or something like that. Um, and yeah, there's an intro screen, I guess, that you're staring at right now. Probably looks better on a CRT screen. And what else? Oh, I think that's about. Yeah, maybe there's when you get the full game, you also get some clues, some invisible clues kind of package. Kind of similar, except it's all digital, of course. So I couldn't do like Infocom had the actual physical books where you had to look at the clues and rub them off or something like that. So it's a little bit different, but you have a digital PDF that gives you clues in case you're stuck. I haven't had too many players reporting that they're absolutely stuck on a puzzle and they really need help. But if you ever are, you can always send me a message. I'll be happy to help you.
Okay, good, thanks. And then you said so you can download a kind of demo version, and then otherwise you need to buy it. And do you get it like a physical copy, or is it just the download on what is it, on Aminet or something like that for Amiga? And
So I mean, on Aminet, I put the demo. I also put the demo. I think it's on the um, I can't remember the big C64 website as well. But the demo is, and the game so far are just digital. I'm hoping to have physical copies, like a physical version made. I'm in talks with a publisher, but it hasn't been done yet, right? So maybe late 2022 you'll be able to buy an actual physical box copy of it. But for now, it's just a digital download with a low price.
yeah,
So
okay, oh, which is nice. Okay, can you
yeah.
just put maybe? I don't think that there are more questions. Just one. Karen is asking if you can show the Amiga links again. Maybe
Oh,
you
for
can
sure.
also And then yes, okay. Eduardo is asking digital download at which site? Maybe you can copy the links if you still have a few minutes in the chat. Yes, please.
Yeah. So for Amiga, this this page is kind of an old version of the Inform6 compiler, and I have a friend who took basically the latest version. So it's C code. So really, you can just compile it on Amiga and it would be okay. I just don't have the binary. I don't know where to find the latest binary, but it's somewhere. Or if you're okay with just downloading the code from GitHub and compiling it on your Amiga, it should be fine, right? And then where can you find the game? I guess I will copy and paste that link and put it in the chat.
Yes, please. Yes, thanks a lot for that. Good, thank you, Hugo. I will stop the recording now.